he wanted to build a car, as he said, to kick their ass on the street, too. So this is Carroll Shelby's answer to Ferrari. There were rumors it was painted Ferrari red, that was his sort of to Ferrari.
For decades, people believed Carroll Shelby's strangest Mustang was gone forever. Not hidden, not misplaced, destroyed. Then a team followed the wrong rumor to the right VIN number, opened the trail Shelby left behind, and found a red coupe sitting in Texas like a ghost from the 1960s. It was not just rare. It was a car that should not have survived at all. And once they knew what it was, it changed the way collectors understood Shelby's secret experiments. The Texan who built cars like weapons. Before Carroll Shelby became one of the most important names in American performance, he was a Texas-born racer with a failing heart and a refusal to slow down. Shelby did not come from the polished world of corporate engineering. He came from grit, instinct, and competition. He raced because speed made sense to him. He won because he understood machines not as products, but as living things that could be pushed, tuned, broken, and rebuilt until they obeyed. By 1959, Shelby had done something most drivers only dream about. He won the 24 Hours of Le Mans with Aston Martin, sharing the victory with Roy Salvadori. But his body was already turning against him. A heart condition forced him out of racing, and for most men, that would have been the end of the story. For Shelby, it became the beginning. If he could not beat Europe from behind the wheel, he would beat it from the workshop. That is where the Shelby legend really begins. He looked at the lightweight British AC Ace and imagined what would happen if it carried American V8 power. The result was the Shelby Cobra, a car so raw and violent, it felt almost rude compared to the polished European machines it was built to embarrass. Shelby's genius was not subtlety, it was combination. Take European handling, add American horsepower, remove the nonsense, and build something that made the establishment nervous. The man Ford needed. By the mid-1960s, Ford needed Carroll Shelby because Ford had a problem it could not solve politely. Ferrari was dominating endurance racing, and Henry Ford II wanted to beat them badly enough to spend enormous money trying. Ford's GT40 project had promise, but it needed the kind of ruthless racing instinct Shelby had already proven. When Shelby American took over the program, the GT40 became more than an expensive idea. It became a weapon aimed at Le Mans. The result was history. Ford defeated Ferrari at Le Mans in 1966, then kept winning in 1967, 1968, and 1969. Shelby's role in that transformation helped cement him as something bigger than a tuner, bigger than a builder, bigger than a loud Texan with a gift for marketing. He became the man American manufacturers called when they needed speed to stop being theoretical. At the same time, Ford also wanted to turn the Mustang into something with real performance credibility. Lee Iacocca understood the Mustang's sales potential, but Shelby understood how to make it dangerous. The GT350 arrived in 1965, and the GT500 followed in 1967. These cars were not only Mustang variants, they were statements. Shelby took a mass-market pony car and gave it teeth. Why Shelby prototypes matter. The important thing to understand is that Shelby's most interesting cars were not always the ones that made it into showrooms. The public remembers the Cobras, GT350, GT500, and GT40, because those cars became icons. But behind every famous performance car is a messier world of prototypes, experiments, rejected parts, test mules, engineering ideas, and cars that were never supposed to survive. That is where the real mystery begins. In the 1960s, prototype cars often had short lives. They were used to test engines, suspensions, brakes, bodywork, or styling ideas, then discarded. sold quietly, or crushed. The people building them were not thinking about future auction values. They were thinking about deadlines, racing results, production decisions, and corporate instructions. If a test car had served its purpose, it could disappear. That is what made the story of Little Red so powerful. For decades, people believed it had disappeared because it had been destroyed, not hidden in a glamorous private vault, not sitting under a perfect museum cover, destroyed. That belief was reasonable because prototype cars were often crushed when their work was done. But Little Red had slipped through the cracks, and that made it one of the most important Shelby mysteries left unsolved. The car everyone thought was dead. Little Red was a 1967 Shelby GT 500 EXP prototype, and it was not like the Shelbys most people picture. It was not a fastback. It was a notchback coupe, which instantly made it strange. Along with the 1968 Green Hornet, Little Red was one of the only notchback coupes ever to wear the Shelby nameplate. That detail alone would make it valuable, but its real importance came from what it represented. Little Red was a development car, a moving laboratory, where Ford and Shelby American tested ideas that could shape future performance and styling. It was connected to big block power, supercharging experiments, styling concepts, and the path that would eventually influence the California Special Mustang. It was not a normal production Shelby. It was a question on wheels. What could the Mustang become if Shelby pushed it further? That is why its disappearance became so frustrating. Collectors knew it had existed. Historians had references. People had photographs, memories, rumors, and old documentation. But the actual car was gone. For decades, many accepted the obvious explanation. Ford or Shelby had sent it to the crusher like so many other prototypes. If that were true, the story was over. But the most dangerous assumption in automotive history is that a lost car is dead just because the paperwork says it should be. Green Hornet opens the door. The search for Little Red really intensified because of the Green Hornet. Craig Jackson, chairman and CEO of Barrett Jackson, owned the 1968 Shelby GT 500 prototype known as the Green Hornet. That car was also an experimental notchback Shelby, fitted with advanced ideas like electronic fuel injection, four-wheel disc brakes, and independent rear suspension. In some ways, Green Hornet felt decades ahead of the Mustang world it came from. During the restoration and research surrounding Green Hornet, Jackson and restoration specialist Jason Billups began talking seriously about Little Red. If Green Hornet survived, could Little Red have survived too? It sounded almost impossible. Collectors had searched for years. Experts believed it had been crushed, stolen, wrecked, or simply lost beyond recovery. But Billups believed there might still be a trail. That is the moment where this story becomes better than the fictional hidden garage version. The real mystery was not solved by someone pulling a cover off a secret car under fluorescent lights. It was solved by research, by paperwork, by looking at the problem differently. Everyone had been searching for Little Red using the Shelby serial number, and that trail led nowhere. Billups and the team realized they needed the original Ford VIN. The VIN that changed everything. That was the breakthrough. The car had two identities, the Shelby identity everyone searched for, and the original Ford identity hiding underneath it. When the team began looking through the Ford VIN trail, instead of only the Shelby serial number, the dead end opened. The VIN led them through old records, registrations, and ownership history, eventually pointing toward Texas. This is the original twist. The car no one knew existed was not hidden because nobody looked. It was hidden because everyone looked for the wrong name. In collector car history, identity is everything. A badge can make a car famous. A VIN can make it real. Little Red had been lost in the gap between those two truths. The Shelby legend made people search one way. The Ford paperwork held the real answer. On March 3, 2018, the team found the car in rural North Texas. It was not sitting like a jewel in a museum. It was rough, weathered, incomplete, and easy to overlook if you did not know what you were seeing. The engine and transmission were out, body panels were missing, It had been sitting among other old cars. To most people, it would have looked like another tired Mustang shell. To the people who understood the VIN, the body, and the clues, it was the Holy Grail. The Texas field that held a legend. The image is almost too perfect. A car built during the height of Shelby's Ford era, presumed destroyed for half a century, sitting in Texas, waiting for someone to ask the right question. That setting matters because it strips away the fantasy. Little Red was not preserved by perfect conditions. It survived by accident, movement, neglect, and misunderstanding. It passed through owners who did not fully know what it was. It ended up stored, moved, stripped, and left behind. That makes the survival more incredible. A prototype car is vulnerable because it often lacks the normal protection that production cars receive from collectors. If no one knows what it is, it can be parted out. If the paperwork is confusing, it can be ignored. If the body looks too ordinary, it can be mistaken for something far less important. Little Red survived because no one destroyed it at the right moment. When Craig Jackson, Jason Billups, and Mustang expert Kevin Marty authenticated it, the story shifted from rumor to history. This was not just a red Mustang, it was the lost Shelby GT 500 EXP prototype. A car that people believed had been erased was suddenly back in the record. Why it should not have existed. Little Red should not have existed because prototype cars usually do not get sentimental treatment. Once a prototype has served its purpose, the company has reasons to eliminate it. Liability, intellectual property, obsolete engineering, experimental parts, and corporate control all push toward destruction or quiet disposal. In the 1960s, no one was thinking that a strange Shelby notchback might one day be worth millions and rewrite Mustang history. That is why the car that should not exist framing works, but the improved version has to point it at the real reason. It is not that Little Red was illegal or supernatural or some hidden twin-turbo monster from a secret garage. It should not exist because the system it came from had every reason to erase it. Ford and Shelby built it to test ideas, not to become a museum piece. When the experiments ended, the car should have vanished like countless other development vehicles, but it did not. And because it survived, it proves something about Shelby's process that normal production cars cannot. Production cars show what companies are willing to sell. Prototypes show what builders were willing to try. Little Red is valuable because it reveals the imagination before the compromise. The technology hidden in the experiments. Little Red and Green Hornet mattered because they tested ideas that would become important later. Green Hornet is famous for features like independent rear suspension, four-wheel disc brakes, and electronic fuel injection. Little Red was tied to supercharging, big block performance, and styling experiments. These were not small tweaks. They were attempts to push the Mustang beyond what normal production allowed at the time. That is the secret power of Shelby's experimental cars. They were not only fast, they were early. They carried ideas before the market was ready, before production systems were ready, before lawyers and budgets and dealers could make peace with them. When modern performance Mustangs finally adopted technologies like independent rear suspension, it made the old Shelby prototypes look less like strange side projects and more like previews of the future. This is why the discovery of Little Red mattered beyond the auction world. It changed the timeline. It showed that some ideas people associate with much later performance cars were being explored by Shelby and Ford decades earlier. Carroll Shelby was not only reacting to the market, he was trying to drag it forward. The California Special Connection. One of the most important parts of Little Red's story is its connection to the 1968 Mustang California Special. Little Red's styling helped inspire the California Special, which brought a Shelby-influenced look to a broader Mustang audience. That means Little Red was not just a dead-end prototype. Its DNA entered production in a different form. That is how prototypes often shape history. They do not always become production cars directly. Sometimes a feature survives, sometimes a stance, a body treatment, a trim idea, or a mechanical experiment moves into something else. The original car disappears, but its ideas keep traveling. Little Red had been gone for decades, yet part of it had already reached the public through the California special. That makes the discovery feel even stranger. People had been seeing echoes of Little Red without knowing the original car was still out there. It was like finding the missing first draft of a famous book after generations had already read the published version. Suddenly, the story of how that design language reached the street became clearer. Carroll Shelby's real secret. The fictional version of the story imagines Shelby hiding one final wild car from corporate suits. The real story reveals something more interesting. Shelby's secret was not one locked garage. It was the experimental culture he created. He built cars in the space between official permission and practical madness. He worked with Ford, but he also pushed Ford. He took corporate resources and racing urgency and turned them into machines that felt more alive than committee-designed cars usually do. That tension defined his career. Shelby needed Ford's money, engines, and manufacturing scale. Ford needed Shelby's credibility, instinct, and ability to make performance feel dangerous. Their relationship produced legends, but it also produced friction. Corporate companies want repeatable products. Shelby wanted results. Prototypes like Little Red and Green Hornet existed because both sides were trying to discover how far the Mustang could go without breaking the business around it. That is the real hidden garage, not a building, but a mindset, a place where ideas were tested before they were safe. Little Red survived from that place. It is a physical reminder that some of Shelby's most important work happened before the brochure, before the press release, before the showroom. The restoration dilemma. Once Little Red was found, the next question became what to do with it. This is where collector car stories become complicated. Some people believe a lost car should be preserved exactly as found, with the rust, missing parts, dust, damage, and scars left intact. To them, the car is evidence. Every imperfection tells the story of survival. Restore too much, and you risk erasing the very thing that made the discovery powerful. Others believe a car like Little Red deserves to live again. Carroll Shelby did not build cars to sit dead under lights. He built them to run, roar, and move. If the goal is to honor Shelby's spirit, then restoration makes sense. Bring the car back to the form it had when it mattered most. Rebuild the engine. Recreate the experimental setup. Let people see and hear what made it special. Craig Jackson and the restoration team chose the difficult path of bringing Little Red back while documenting the process carefully. That mattered because this was not just a cosmetic restoration. The car had changed over time, and its experimental history meant there was no single, simple production spec to follow. Restoring a prototype is like restoring a moving target. You have to decide which moment in its life you are trying to save. The day Little Red returned. In January 2020, Little Red was unveiled publicly at Barrett-Jackson in Scottsdale, Arizona. The moment was powerful because it brought together the two experimental Shelby notchbacks that had shaped so much collector mythology, Little Red and the Green Hornet. For the first time in history, both could be seen together in restored form. The lost car was no longer just a rumor or a footnote. It was real, red, and back in front of the world. That reveal changed how people talked about Shelby prototypes. It proved that myths can survive under layers of bad information. It proved that a car believed destroyed can still be found if researchers stop accepting the old answer. It also proved that documentation in the collector world can become an active investigation. The search for Little Red was not solved by one lucky glance. It involved crowdsourcing, old records, expert authentication, and the willingness to follow clues most people had missed. That makes the discovery more valuable than a simple barn find. A barn find is exciting because something rare is uncovered. Little Red was different because it forced historians to correct the record. It was not simply found, it was recovered from a mistaken belief. Why collectors care so much? Collectors care about cars like Little Red because they sit at the intersection of rarity, influence, and story. A rare car with no story is valuable. A historically important car with a great story becomes something else entirely. Little Red was the only GT 500 coupe built by Shelby American, one of the two experimental Shelby notchbacks, a prototype linked to supercharging and California special styling, a car believed destroyed, and a vehicle found after decades of failed searches. Every part of that sentence adds weight, but its value is not only financial. Cars like Little Red remind people why automotive history is never fully settled. There are still missing records, forgotten photographs, private collections, wrong assumptions, old yards, and cars sitting under weather that may turn out to be far more important than anyone realizes. The Shelby world is heavily documented, but Little Red proves that even the most studied legends can still hide something. So what do you think? Is Little Red the greatest lost Shelby discovery ever? Or is there still another forgotten prototype sitting somewhere under dust, waiting for the right person to find the right number? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories about lost cars, secret prototypes, and the legends hidden inside automotive history, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you do not miss what comes next.